Welcome to another edition of the LSU Business and Industry Show. I'm Gordy Rush, my co-host Tim Johnson, and we have a very special guest with us that since he's been on the scene, he's setting podcasts metric number records. He's been fantastic, so we're excited about this show.
Yeah, we're only having him on so he can help us.
He's
with
helping
numbers,
us,
right? I don't know that I've been more excited about a podcast that we've taped since we've been back on the air, Gordy, as we are today. But it's Dr. Wade Rousse, who is the new president of LSU and the system, generating crazy kind of buzz out there.
Absolutely.
And we are just honored to have you with us today.
It is an honor to be with you guys. And you may have heard me say that it is the honor of my life to wake up every morning and put on purple. You know, I'm an early morning guy, but I get up every morning. Every time I tie that tie, and I will always have a little piece of purple on. And it's the honor of my life to be in this role and to also be with you guys today.
Well, that passion, I think, is part of what is setting you apart and making you such an attractive figure in our state, and we're going to get into a lot of that. But you were responsible, prior to coming to LSU, for a real-world turnaround at McNeese. I think it was a 14-year enrollment decline that you faced there when you became president chancellor at McNeese, and turned that around, brought great fundraising there. Talk about that effort and what it meant to you and what it meant to Southwest Louisiana.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. You know, we don't do anything alone. It's we. And we had a great team at McNeese. And, you know, I like to talk about lightning in a bottle. And when you have everybody kind of really focused on the true mission, understanding what those objectives are, how we're going to get that done, we had that going on for a little while. We inherited a pretty bad situation there. It was 14 years of enrollment decline. But we put together a team. We invested in athletics, as most of you know, that we had to stabilize a 14-year enrollment decline, and we put together a strategic plan there that was like, okay, how do we leverage our core competencies? When you think about building any plan, you look at the core competencies within the organization. How do we leverage that? How do we truly leverage that? And we live in South Louisiana. And South Louisiana, we like this. We like communities. We like tailgating. We like big dinners. We like crawfish balls. We like gathering around a black pot and cooking a jambalaya. That's who we are as a community. So it made perfect sense to us there was to say we're gonna swim upstream a little bit here and double down in our athletics program, and that led to the hire of Will Wade, and that was a very, very integral part of truly changing the culture, creating the excitement, changing the enrollment trends that ultimately fixed the budget. So it was a very, very detailed plan. It was very strategic. We did eliminate a lot of programs. We eliminated some folks that maybe weren't as energized as everybody else, and we gave them the opportunity to go be excellent somewhere else and really put a team together that was going to drive and try to score every time we touched the ball. Let's score every day. The motto we live by is today. We're going to win today. Got a win bar in my office, and every day we try to win today. And if you stack enough of those days together, you're going to lose a day or two in between. But if you stack enough of those days together, you can make some really substantial changes. And that's what we were able to do at McNeese. I love McNeese. I will always love McNeese, and it's going to be a special day for me. We're already planning parties starting on Wednesday this year when they come into Tiger Stadium. Don't get me wrong, I'll have my purple on. I bleed purple and gold. But any other time when they're not playing the Tigers, I am a huge McNeese fan and will always be. I went to undergrad at McNeese. Yeah. I like to say I practiced a lot of football at McNeese. I had the opportunity to go there, got my school paid for, never played it down, but practiced a lot. So everybody said, well, you played ball in college. I said, no, I practiced ball in college. I practiced a whole lot of ball in college. But it gave me the opportunity to get a life-changing higher educational experience. And I went on to get my undergrad and went to work, stayed there 3 years, went to work in basically offshore in the marine transportation business, but actually graduated from Nichols. And then my first master's was from UNO, second master's from University of Illinois, Chicago, and my PhD from Chicago in economics. And but if it wouldn't have been for that opportunity to go to McNeese and play ball and be a part of it, there's no doubt I would not be sitting in this chair today. So that time at McNeese is very, very special to me, both as an undergrad and as the president.
There are some real parallels, too, about your initial time at LSU and some of the things that you talked about at McNeese. But I had lunch yesterday with my friend and your chief of staff, Jason French, and we talked a little bit about the LNG Center of Excellence that you and he together were able to create at McNeese. Talk about that center and what you expect it to have in terms of impact, not just on Southwest Louisiana, but on Louisiana's economy in general.
Yeah, there's a bigger question in there when we think about how do we fund researches in the current era, if you will. When you think about America, when you think about the United States, you think about the $40 trillion of debt. You know, I'm an economist. I'm constantly thinking at the macro level. There's $40 trillion of debt. A lot of people are punching the panic sign. You know, it's unsustainable. We're going to have to slow the debt growth down. What does that look like for the value of the dollar? In our current role, when you think about what effect that's going to have in our current day operations, it's truly going to have an effect on research. When you think about research funding, you have NSF and you have NIH funding. That's all national, federal level funding. Well, you have heard the stories that they're starting to squeeze those that just don't have the dollars to fund that, to fund those resources as the growth was to 15 or 20 years ago. So when we think about that and we analyze that, okay, where's the opportunity? Constantly, every issue creates an opportunity. So where's the opportunity in that case? So when we start thinking about that, it's okay. It's truly private, public sector partnerships that can drive research. That's where the opportunity is at. And the funny part, if you take a very long historical look at the research portfolio and how it was funded, if you go back 100 years ago, it was those private-public partnerships that some of the greatest inventions that we have in medicine and so on and so forth was a university. It was a company. They made a private-public partnership. They figured out the problem, and then they figured out a way to monetize that solution together, both for the university as well as to advance the profit incentive for the company or the partner in that case. So when I think about the macro level of debt at the national level, I think about an enormous opportunity for us to drive private-public partnerships in terms of research at the university level. I know that was a long answer to get to that LNG Center of Excellence, but that was the mindset behind it. We had LNG was blowing up in Southwest Louisiana. It's now blowing up all over the state. Billions and billions of dollars of capital getting poured into the state. How did we, as that regional institution, how do we truly differentiate ourselves and drive some of that research, even though the mission of McNeese is not an R1 institution. It's not a research institution. So we had a consortium that we brought in Southern. We brought in I still call them USL. They get very upset when you say that. But ULL, which is an R1 now, an R2, and recently up to an R1, to bring in a research portfolio to meet that need. How could we get with the LNG industry, have a wide consortium, have it on McNeese's campus to also have workforce development, and the research piece, as well as what a lot of people don't know, we were able to get PHMSA, which is the regulatory body that regulates the LNG industry, to locate in that building. And also, it's truly the LNG Center of Excellence located on McNeese's campus. So very, very proud of that. And what it can look like moving forward and what it means to that side of the state and the state in general is a big deal.
Well, you think about LNG, and we've had Tommy Fauché on the program and talked about the fact that Louisiana is truly powering the world. We think about those exports, and so that center is positioned to be to play a critical role in the global economy for a long, long time.
Absolutely. And we think about Three Stews when we were building that thing. We wanted to be a thought leader in terms of research. And how do we improve processes? How do we figure out the economics of shipping? All of the processes. So a thought leader in the research side of that. The other side was how do we develop the workforce to support that group? They need everything from accountants to chemical engineers to blue collar labor, and how do we build out that labor force to continuing education? And then when we think about the third piece, we really wanted to have the federal piece in that building, so that you felt like it was a true center of excellence. The regulator lives here. We're going to continue to develop strategy and policy together with industry and the regulator. Having everybody in one building was a big accomplishment. We're really proud of that.
Excellent.
Dr. Rousse, let's shift our focus here to Baton Rouge. And when you talk about LSU, one of greatest brands in college and universities.
greatest.
Okay, the greatest,
Yes.
but absolutely the greatest. So many positives with this campus, and of course there's challenges. Let's talk about some of the challenges that you're dealing with, and like with anything in life, you're going to have things to deal with.
Yeah, I love that question, Gordy. Thank you for that. It's the challenge, the biggest challenge that we are having to address is the idea that we can be great, not only in Tiger Stadium, but we can be great as a university system. And in order to do that, the status quo just won't cut it. We're ranked 48th in higher educational attainment in this state. We're ranked 48th in higher educational attainment. And when you think about how we've structured higher education in this state, it's not optimal. Mm-hmm. And you think about Arizona, where I spent most of a decade. There's 7 million people in Arizona. There's 2 higher education boards. There's 3 public universities. The smallest one's Northern Arizona University, equivalent to our A&M campus. When you come home, now I missed it. I was gone for 20 years and I cried a lot of days. But you come home to compare that. There's 5 higher education boards. There's 16 public universities. Mm-hmm. And no matter what metric you look at, it's suboptimal. So thinking that we can just trim around the status quo and move ourselves from being 48th in higher educational attainment is, again, a fallacy. So what we got to do is we got to think about transformational change and getting everyone throughout this entire state. It's a big organization. Mm-hmm. It's $3.8 billion of expenditures. You get 2,000 employees. 20,000 employees. Mm-hmm. And you think about 5,000 of those employees are student workers of the sort, but you still 15,000 full-time FTEs within the system. It's a big organization. So our challenge is to talk the vision into existence. That's why you keep hearing me say excellence and accessibility. We're going to be excellent. We're going to be excellent. And we're going to do that, and we're going to measure that. Talk is cheap, right? You got to measure things, and we're going to be excellent. We're going to measure that by being a top 50 research institution. First step of getting that done is we restructured the research portfolio. We tied in the 2 health science centers in Pennington into the A&M campus, made one portfolio to truly start not only to just improve our rankings at the initial move. That's kind of this easy part. But what happens next is that you got a bigger portfolio, and now you can start leverage. We got this expert in Shreveport. We got this expert in Baton Rouge. You got this expert at Pennington. You got this expert at the Health Science Center in New Orleans. How do we leverage that and collaborate to maybe get larger grants that are more attractable to that sort of collaborating effort? So it's the idea of growth. So we structured that, and the whole goal there is to be a top 50 research institution. We want to be a top 50 research institution. We don't only want to beat Florida in Tiger Stadium. We want to beat them in research as well. So that's the first part.
Well, I want to interject there, and obviously you'll continue responding to Gordy's question, but I'm a lifelong resident of this state and grew up in a little northern Evangeline Parish, a little small town there, but came to Baton Rouge in the mid-'80s to finish my degree at LSU and got to work as a legislative aide in the Louisiana Senate. And went on to spend about 6 or 7 years of my initial career out of college on the staff there. And I heard this conversation a lot, Dr. Rousse. Man, if we can just get to average in the South. Boy, if we could be average. If we do this, we'll move to average in the South. And I'm sitting there as a 19, 20-year-old Louisiana resident thinking, really? Is that our goal? And it always has been our goal. And my question is, along the lines of what you're talking about, why has being average in the South ever been our goal? Why not top 5 in America in everything we do?
Amen to that.
And we've got the things that occur naturally here in this state that don't occur anywhere else. Why isn't it our goal to be top 5 in America in academics and in athletics and in infrastructure and in quality of life for our people and all of those things? And I believe in part we're not there because we've never lifted our eyes that high. We've never aspired to that level of excellence. That's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I've had I've been able to study at some of the best universities in America, and I keep telling everyone I never once, while I was at the Federal Reserve, while I was teaching all across Chicago, never once did I feel like I didn't have the foundational background as any person that was there, Ivy League, didn't matter. I never once felt like I didn't have the tool set from our state right here in Louisiana. So the only reason is we haven't been willing enough to put it on paper and say that's the goal, and here's the next steps and how we're going to get there. But we're saying that now.
Yeah.
We're going to be a top 50 research institution. We've restructured in order to do that, and we're laser focused on it. And every action we make is how do we put the next dollar that has the highest ROI to go get us to be a top 50 research institution. How do we do that? But that's only one part, because we think about Louisiana as a whole. The second part of that is accessibility. Mm-hmm. We want, if you're a late bloomer, we think you should have a life-changing higher educational experience in Louisiana if you choose to do so. We do that by thinking about that systematically. So the standards have to go up on the A&M campus, and they will, and they're already starting to go up. With that, with 68,000 applications for 7,800 spots, how do we take some of those folks when we have a hard standard in place to say, hey, welcome to LSU. Welcome to LSU. You didn't quite make it into A&M, but we're going to place you in Alexandria. And if you go do this for 4 classes in the fall, these 4 classes in the spring, you can come right on over and join us as a sophomore, or New Orleans, or Shreveport, or any one of our system schools, in Eunice, and all great institutions really doing really, really wonderful work. And I was giving this talk in Alexandria, and I'll never forget this. The chief of police stood up and said, Doc, he said, I want to thank you for your vision and so clear of we're going to be a top 50 here, and here's the standards, and here's how you're going to get in there, and here's the accessibility paths. He said, but I want you to also remember those pathways, and the clearness of those pathways are so important for like my girls who went to LSU A&M and just a little too big. And they were able to come back and they love it at Alexandria. And the point is, if we're clear about here's excellence, here's accessibility, we're going to measure this accessibility, by the way, by starting salaries and placement rates. We've got to get our people, we've got to get our students jobs. We're going to measure this by being a top 50 research institution. We're going to measure this by starting salaries and placement rates. But more importantly, the clear pathways to have I like to call it a Common Core 24. My chancellors don't like that, but I like to think your first 24 credits, your first 4 classes in the fall, your first 4 classes in the spring should go anywhere in the progression of any degree throughout the LSU system. And that way you can find your way, and we're giving a clear path that everybody has a better chance to succeed. So we're going to be excellent, we're going to be accessible, and if we do that correctly, we won't be 48th in higher educational attainment. And why it's one of my biggest pet peeves is that if you're paying attention, the amount of capital that's rolling into this state is unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable when you think about LNG, when you think about data centers. It's unbelievable. So if we do our part to move from 48 to 44th, GDP is going to go so much higher, and the living standards of all Louisiana is going to get better. We're currently 39th in GDP growth, which at first, when I tell you we're 48th in higher educational attainment, we're 44th in labor force participation. How could we be 39th? The way we're 39th is because we got so much capital pouring into the state. Labor and capital drives economic growth. We've got the pressure's on us to do better to make sure we educate Louisiana to drive that labor force participation rate up to meet that capital where it is. That's going to drive GDP growth, and living standards of all Louisianians will get better. And if we do that, I don't have any kids of my own. I like to say I got 70,000 of them spread all over the state. They're all ours, and Miss Angela loves everyone, and when she sees one upset, she wants to fight for them. We love them all like they're ours. But if we do that, we're truly creating a living standard and opportunity for that capital to continue to come in, so that students don't have to leave the state when they graduate. The opportunity is going to be right here in the great state of Louisiana.
You mentioned elevating LSU's prestige as a research institution, and you mentioned public-private partnerships and how critical they are to driving research. But the practical application of that in terms of, as you said, being able to monetize research and hand it off to businesses and let them run with the ball. I mean, I know there are things going on the LSU campus like this new construction center of excellence, right? And some investment that has taken place there and going on with Dr. Vicki Colvin and the LSU Center of Engineering. Talk about that connection for that research and how it can be monetized, but the critical importance of those relationships.
Yeah, that's so important to where it kind of was back to that first question about how do we partner up and commercialize some of this research that's not just going to be federally funded research. So when we think about, you bring up a great example about the School of Construction Management and Advanced Manufacturing that we're getting. We're rebuilding America from companies that are located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
That's exactly right.
We're rebuilding America. And you know who's the number one construction management school in America? It's LSU. And that shouldn't be the exception. We want that to be the norm. But the reason that thing is so on fire is you got this community graduates that have built enormous companies, that believe in the vision, that realize it's got to evolve. They're pouring money back into the education side of things. We're developing the curriculum to make sure that curriculum is vibrant. So when those kids graduate, they're not looking for a job. There's jobs waiting on them because it's this circular flow. You have industry, curriculum, jobs, the dollars that come from it. This circular flow that continues to be there. So it's that, in my mind, is sort of the holy grail, if you will, of what we do in higher education. When we can truly see, hey, we got supporters from industry telling us, what do we need to graduate? We got curriculum quicking as fast as we can to make sure we meet that demand and getting it back into the market. That's when you can do something special, and that's what's happening in construction management, advanced manufacturing at LSU. And the amount of industry support is unbelievable. And that core group of folks, I'm not going to start calling out names here. Y'all know who they are. It's about 5 or 6 of those core guys. Mm-hmm. They were the first graduating class of construction management from LSU. They're unbelievable.
The 1972 LSU construction management graduating class is a who's who of construction management professionals in this country.
They're literally rebuilding America as we speak.
I tell you, I got to see that LSU CIAC where all of them were on stage and spoke, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was in Canton, Ohio there. It was the Hall of Fame.
It was the Hall of Fame.
It is the Hall of Fame. You think about the Eddie Respondes and the Art Falls and the Pepper Rutland and the Lane Grigsby's and the Lenny Lemoynes, and the list goes on.
You did good there. I knew I was going to miss one, but you got 5 of the big
ones. And here's the
rolling tubes. Rolling, I get trouble.
He was their teacher.
He was their
teacher.
I know, right?
You think about that, and you think about, but it once again pointing to what occurs naturally in this state being so important and so impressive, and the need to harness all of that in the right direction.
And to think about what you said earlier about why do we want to be the Southern average? Think about the resources we have in Louisiana. We were endowed with this. We are so blessed with deep water, the Gulf, agriculture,
energy,
forestry, industry. I mean, I spent 10 years in Arizona.
New Orleans, and we talked about LSU New Orleans and everything that means.
I mean, when you think about the natural resources that we have in this state, it is unbelievable. Yeah. It is unbelievable. And I will say this, and Susan Bourgeois at LED is doing an amazing job. This current administration is doing an amazing job. They're putting the capital. They're creating a business-friendly environment to get that capital to pour across this state. We've got to make sure that we have the labor in place, that this continues, that this is not 10 years from now we say, oh, remember when we had $250 billion of capital poured in our state? That was a one-off. That was the spark that changed everything for our state. And that's what's driving higher education in this state.
I know Gordy's got a question, but you think about being top 5 in America. Not per capita, number 1 in America for investment into our state, capital flowing into our state.
Yeah, LSU athletics is also a big business, and obviously we're in a different age of athletics. And how do you balance that with the core mission of the school and obviously the academic side?
Yeah, so Gordy, I'm a Louisiana guy. I never lost this accent. You know, I tell this story constantly. You know, anybody that grew up in Louisiana, your dream is to go to LSU and play in Tiger. That's what every at least that was every guy I know.
And at least one of us on this set has had that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, but when you think, I'm so biased, but I'm really a nerd at heart, and I'm going to teach in the fall. I teach macroeconomics. I'm going to teach at 6:00 on Monday night in the fall. It's important to me when I think about everything we do in terms of the politics, in terms of the structural restructuring, having to make the hard decisions in terms of what departments are going to get the marginal dollar. All of that. If you lose touch with the reason we're really here is to change those kids' lives, which I get from being in that classroom, then you just go run a hedge fund. So for me, the purple and gold and athletics is personal. I've been a fan since I can tell you I can tell you years of the most popular play. But I don't let that taint what's the best thing for this university and this system and this state. I think of this, people always want to separate the two. When we think about $3.8 billion of expenditures. Athletic expenditures for the host systems, $320 million. It's not that big of a piece, but it's the loudest. It's the most proudest. It's our brand. It's who we are. It's like I said earlier, we're going to have students at every campus throughout this state with a big screen on campus watching the Tigers beat Clemson. It's every corner of the state. So I don't let it taint the idea of the mission that we're here to change lives through education. But I also won't let it take away from the fact that it drives our brand.
Sure.
And it allows us to attract that student from Wisconsin that saw the Tigers on Saturday beat Clemson and end up saying, I want to go be a part of that. And it's a huge part of how we attract students to be able to change their lives. So they're not too many people want to make those two things independent.
Understood.
They are definitely not independent. They're both together, and they both push us towards our mission. Having said all of that, it has taken a lot more time than I had bargained for since I just was on the call, SEC president's call. Literally, that's why I was late and lost. I was on the call driving over here. It's an everyday, all hands on deck right now as we're trying to get congressional assistance to get an unsustainable situation under control.
Yes.
So it's taken a lot more time than I had envisioned. I'm embracing it. I'm not running away from problems. We run towards problems. That's what we do as leaders, and we're going to figure out what's the best steps forward. So to answer the question, how do I balance that time? I don't want to say unfortunately, but the first 7 or 8 months it has taken more time than I anticipated the amount of time I'm spending on athletics. It's probably a third of my time right now in terms of everything we're doing, in terms of the restructure at the federal level. It's going to be. I'm leaving to go to Alaska for my first vacation on Friday, and Sankey, when we got off the phone, we're going to meet every day. I'm thinking, I'm gonna be catching halibut. I'm gonna be catching halibut and have the phone right here.
Somebody's got to take a break. Every now.
I'm gonna get on the call, but he will catch me reeling the halibut up.
Well, I was about to ask this question one way, but I think I'm going to ask it another way now. You think about these athletic personalities at LSU, right? Verge Osbury, Heath Troy that you brought over from McNeese, Lane Kiffin, Will Wade, Kim Mulkey. Jay Johnson,
we got the best.
Jay Clark, Beth Torino. I mean, Dennis Shaver, on and on and on and on. I was going to ask you about those personalities and how you deal with it, but I'm going to switch gears on that a little bit. So you've got this.
I love them all, by the way.
That's right, and I know you've got a great relationship with them. You've got this all-star lineup of these high-profile coaches leading your sports programs, your athletic programs. How do you build that same all-star lineup that we might know about at some point on the academic side of the university?
I love that. We are really focused on sort of the National Academy hires, if you will. We really, really are focused on trying to go get those researchers and we've got a lot of times we don't tell the story.
That's right.
But we've got some world-class folks on our campuses that we don't tell the story as much as we should. I heard somebody say one time that when my chemistry provider, he said, my chemistry professor puts 102,000 in the classroom to listen to a chemistry lecture. Maybe he'll get that much.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That hits me in the heart as an economics
Sure.
professor to say, but we just got to embrace it. But I don't want to dismiss the fact that we've got some world-class sciences. We have some world-class instructors located throughout this state that are doing amazing things. But we want to build on that. To be a top 50, we're going to have to build on that. We're going to have to hire the talent to get there that's going to bring research portfolios with them that can drive us towards the top 50. And in terms of, you're going to hear me constantly say dynamic market-driven curriculum. What that basically means, our kids get jobs upon graduation. We've got to be willing to change that curriculum. And we think about all the regional campuses we have. I mean, the story in LSU Alexandria is unbelievable.
Spent my first 2 years in college.
It's the fastest growing rural campus in America. They have put their objectives in place. They know where they're going. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. It's an unbelievable story. When you think about, I'm going to put it this way, 5,700 students graduated from A&M this semester. What was the second largest graduating class?
I'm assuming it's LSU Alexandria.
It's not, but most people say Tulane, and then they say Louisiana Tech, and then they say And I say, no, it's not Tulane. It's not Louisiana Tech. Oh, it's ULL. No, not ULL. Southeastern. Nope. It's LSU Shreveport.
How about that?
LSU Shreveport, 1,887 students graduated.
Wow.
LSU A&M's the highest. LSU Shreveport's the second highest. And the fastest growing is LSU Alexandria. And you think about Eunice.
Yeah.
Eunice is embracing
Pretty good baseball program.
Pretty good
Yes.
baseball
Yes.
program. Same sort of strategy that went on at McNeese. Embracing the idea that we're the workforce engine of the system. Again, you're going to hear me talk about Louisiana. This is a system. It's how we change the way we educate Louisiana. Why are we excited about LSU New Orleans? Why do we call it LSU New Orleans? We talked about the best brand in the world. I'm biased. I think it is. I wear that LSU everywhere. No matter where I'm at in the world, somebody comes talk to me. So LSU and New Orleans.
Yeah.
Two crazy brands. We think we can really leverage that to attract international students. Because if you're in Europe, New Orleans resonates more than Baton Rouge in terms of just that brand. Now, LSU with New Orleans, we think it's a way to truly drive international student, our online enrollment. We think it's an opportunity. And if we think about it systematically, you think about Alexandria. Undergraduate, 4-year, true pathway to A&M. You think about LSUE, 2-year, focused on the workforce. Everybody's got a place in when we're thinking about how we're laying this thing out systematically. Bridgeway programs to each one of the other schools. Think about LSU New Orleans. This is going to be internationally focused. It's going to leverage the LSU. Think about LSU Shreveport. LSU Shreveport's doubled down on online master's program. Really an enormous amount of growth in Masters of Public Health, because of all of the administrators in healthcare that are needed. So we're trying to dissect what are the needs of our state and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. We're streamlining the operations to meet those needs. And we're thinking about it. That's why you're going to constantly hear me say, what's the only thing that binds Alexandria, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Eunice, New Orleans, all 64 parishes with our ag extensions. There's only one entity that can do that. It's 3 letters, 2 colors, 1 state. We're all LSU. We're one LSU. And the more we start echoing that in every corner of this state, people will realize the system that can really push this thing forward is LSU.
Final question for you. This is Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Your message to the leaders of Louisiana business and industry in the state.
First of all, thank you. I think we got some exciting things going on. We're looking for your partnership. Leadership's hard. Leadership's absolutely hard. My favorite quote of all time is Milton from an economist. So it's Milton Friedman. And he says, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there'd be a shortage of sand. He talks about the inefficiencies of government and so on and so forth. But my second quote is not a famous American economist. It is a football coach that y'all all know, Nick Saban. He says, if you want to be popular, sell ice cream. Don't be a leader. Because leadership's hard. Every decision you make on something this scale, you're dissecting everything. You're going to make a decision that you know good and well is going to upset 40% of the population that you deal with, but the 60%, you got to keep stacking those decisions and wins into place to push us forward. So from the leaders across the state, I say thank you for what you do. Second thing is we want your partnership. We absolutely want your partnership. We are not convinced that we need to be happy by being 48th in higher educational attainment. We're just not convinced that. And when you go back to what I said earlier, when I first got home, because we have all of these resources, I heard over and over and over, but you don't need a post-high school credential to get a job because we have all of these opportunities in the state, which is true. But if you really prescribe to that theory, that means if we're 48th in higher educational attainment, we should be 3rd in labor force participation rate because everybody gets a job because they don't need a credential.
That's right.
But we rank 44th in labor force participation rate. The reason we're 48th in higher educational attainment, 44th in labor force participation rate, but we're 39th in GDP growth. That's astonishing in my mind. If I would just give you those two numbers, you would probably guess we'd rank between 48th and 44th, 46th. But we're 39. We're 39 because we're getting all of this capital to pour in this state because everybody else is doing their job. Secretary of LED is doing her job. Governor's doing his job. It's up to higher education to do our job. And in order to do that, we need the leaders of this industry to partner with us. And I'm not asking for your money. I am a little bit, but not all the way. But to truly make it known, what do you need? and to make it, to tap into those corporate and those sponsorships that we have within the colleges with our corporate partners, and make it known what's the curriculum, how do we adjust the curriculum to meet that labor where it's at. So if we do that, the legacy is going to be that we're not 48th in higher educational attainment. All of a sudden, we're going to be ranked in the top 25 in GDP growth, and you want to be in the top 25 in GDP growth because the top 25 take from the bottom 25. So you want to be in the top 25. And we can get there. There's no reason we can't get there. But we're not going to get there, I'm going to tell you this. We're not going to get there by just clipping the status quo. It's going to take transformational change. That's what we're trying to put in place. That's what we're pushing as hard as we can. That's why we take the arrows we take. But we believe after we put transformational change in place, we get a year or two down the road, we'll get that bandwagon effect where everybody jumps on board, and then we can really start accelerating.
I'm going to let you wrap us up, but
Sure.
I got to tell you, as a guy who loves that institution, who bleeds purple and gold just like you do, who loves this state, who wants to be top 5 in America in everything we do, this has been really good for me today. I'm fired up, brother.
I
I'm
am
ready
too.
to go to work. And so, Dr. Rousse, thank you for your work. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you guys so much for having me and helping us tell the story.
Absolutely. For Tim Johnson, I'm Gordy Rush. This has been the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.